The steam rising from the bowl of oxtail jampong was the only thing blurred in my world. Everything else was sharp, cold, and lonely. I sat in the corner of the VIP suite, the shadows of the Seoul K restaurant wrapping around me like a shroud. I didn't come here for the status. I didn't come here because I was hungry. I came here to be haunted. I lifted the spoon, the rich, spicy broth glistening under the dim chandelier. As the heat hit my tongue, my eyes closed involuntarily. My heart stuttered. It was her. It was the exact ratio of toasted sesame and charred chili that Gina used to make in our tiny apartment in Chicago, back when I was just a man in love and not a monster in a three-piece suit. How was this possible? I'd hired 5-star chefs from Seoul to Paris, and none of them could recreate this specific, soulful ache in a bowl. But here, in this quiet restaurant, someone was cooking with her soul. "You eat too fast, Jae-Min," her voice whispered in the back of my mind. "Slow down. Taste the life in it." I gripped the edge of the table until my knuckles turned white. 6 years. 6 years of searching, of waking up in the middle of the night reaching for a side of the bed that was cold. My mother told me she'd taken the money. The video, the one they showed her to get her to leave, had worked too well. I didn't know about the video then. I only knew that one day she was my world and the next, she was a ghost who had deleted every trace of herself. I pushed the bowl away. I couldn't breathe. The air in this room was too thick with her memory. Suddenly, the velvet curtain to the VIP area rustled. I expected the manager with his fake smile and his endless bowing. I was ready to snap at him to leave me in my misery. But the person who walked in didn't bow. He was small. Maybe 6 years old. He was wearing a simple hoodie and sneakers that had seen better days, but that wasn't what stopped my heart. I froze. The glass of water in my hand remained suspended in midair. I forgot how to exhale. The boy had my face. Not just a resemblance, it was a biological mirror. He had my sharp, straight nose. He had the same slight, arrogant tilt of the chin that my father had passed down to me. But his skin was a beautiful, deep bronze, and his hair was a crown of thick, dark curls that I knew, with a painful certainty, belonged to Gina. He didn't look afraid of me. He looked at me with an intensity that felt like he was reading my very soul. "You're the one who eats here every Tuesday," the boy said. His voice was calm, steady, and far too old for a child his age. I found my voice, though it sounded like it was being dragged over gravel. "Who are you? Where is your mother?" The boy stepped closer, his eyes locked onto mine. He didn't answer my question. Instead, he leaned against the table, mirroring my exact posture, a habit I'd had since I was a child. He looked at my empty table, then at the single chair across from me. "My mom is the best cook in the world, but she always eats her own birthday cake alone," he said quietly. A cold shiver raced down my spine. The food. The face. The timing. The boy leaned in, his voice dropping to a whisper that felt like a lightning strike. "Can you be my mom's date tonight?" The world stopped spinning. I stared at him, my mind racing through 1,000 impossible scenarios. This boy, he was the living proof of a life I thought I'd lost. He was the answer to every prayer I'd never dared to say out loud. "Why me?" I whispered, my heart hammering so hard I thought it would crack a rib. "Because," the boy said, a small, knowing smile tugging at the corner of his mouth, the same smile I saw in the mirror every morning. "She hasn't smiled in a long time. And I think you're the only one who can make her remember how." The heat of the industrial stove was the only thing keeping me upright. I wiped a stray curl from my forehead with my shoulder, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The kitchen was a war zone of clinking pans and shouting orders, but I was in my own world. Today was my 32nd birthday. I hadn't told anyone. Not Bill, the owner, and certainly not the other cooks who saw me as nothing more than the mystery talent who stayed in the back. I liked it that way. In the back, I was safe. In the back, nobody asked why a girl from Chicago was hiding in a Korean restaurant in LA. "Happy birthday, Gina," I whispered to myself as I plated the last order of jampong. My heart felt heavy, like a stone sinking in an ocean. Every time I made this dish, I felt like I was bleeding onto the plate. It was his favorite. Jae-Min. The man who had looked me in the eye and told me I was his forever, only to let his mother show me a video of him calling me a worthless distraction a week later. The pain of that betrayal was a physical scar. I could still see his face in that video, the cold, mocking laugh as he talked about how easy it was to play me. I'd left that night with nothing but the clothes on my back and a secret growing inside me that I refused to let him destroy. I'd spent 6 years building a wall around my heart. I'd spent 6 years making sure my son, Vincent, never had to know the cold, ruthless world of the man who had sired him. "Vincent? Baby, where are you?" I called out, looking toward the small corner of the kitchen where I usually kept him. He was gone. Panic flared in my chest. Vincent was a quiet boy, an observer, but he was also deeply protective of me. "Bill, have you seen Vincent?" I shouted over the hiss of the fryers. The owner looked up from his clipboard, frowning. "I saw him slipping toward the VIP suites a few minutes ago." "I thought he was with you." My blood ran cold. The VIP suites. That's where the regular sat, the powerful man who came in every Tuesday, the one Bill warned me never to disturb. I dropped my tongs, the metal clanging loudly on the floor. I didn't care about the orders. I didn't care about the job. If Vincent had walked into that room. I sprinted toward the swinging double doors, my heart in my throat. Before we find out if Gina catches her son before he reveals the truth, make sure to comment, subscribe, and like this video if you're rooting for a reunion that changes everything. I stared at the piece of paper the boy, Vincent, had pressed into my hand. It was an address in a neighborhood that my driver would usually avoid. A place of cracked sidewalks and faded dreams. "Please don't tell her I asked," Vincent said, his small hand reaching out to touch my sleeve. His touch felt like a brand. "She doesn't like surprises, but she needs this." "I'll be there," I said, my voice barely a whisper. I didn't ask his mother's name. I didn't need to. The taste of that food and the face of this child were the only evidence I required. As Vincent slipped back through the curtains, disappearing into the kitchen, I stood up. My legs felt like lead. I walked out of the restaurant, ignoring the manager's frantic bows. My mind was a storm. I got into the back of my black sedan, my hands trembling as I showed the address to my driver. "We're going here." "Now." "Sir, that's not a safe area for." "Drive," I commanded, my voice cold and absolute. As the car glided through the city streets, I looked at the sunflowers I'd ordered my assistant to have in the car for a business meeting I'd just canceled. Sunflowers. Her favorite. I wasn't the man I was 6 years ago. I was harder, more ruthless, but inside, a small flame of hope was roaring into a forest fire. If this was her, if she had kept my son from me, I should be angry. I should be furious. But as the car pulled up to the modest, slightly weathered apartment building, all I felt was a terrifying, soul-deep hunger. I stepped out of the car, the cool night air hitting my face. I walked up the stairs, each step feeling like a mile. I reached apartment 4B. I stood there for a long moment, the bouquet of sunflowers gripped in my hand. My heart was beating so loud I was sure the neighbors could hear it. I raised my hand, my knuckles hovering over the wood. I knocked. The silence on the other side of the door was agonizing. Then I heard the sound of footsteps. Soft, hesitant. The door creaked open. I wiped my damp hands on my apron, the scent of the birthday cupcakes I'd just pulled from the oven clinging to my skin. It was a small comfort, the only sweetness in a day that felt like a marathon. Vincent was unusually quiet in the other room, and for a second, I let myself believe that maybe, just for one night, the world would let me be soft. Then came the knock. It wasn't the hurried rap of the landlord or the light tap of the neighbor's kid. It was heavy, deliberate. A sound that seemed to vibrate through the floorboards and settle in the pit of my stomach. "I'll get it," Vincent shouted, his voice high with an excitement I didn't understand. "Vincent, wait." I moved toward the small hallway, my heart beginning to gallop for no reason I could name. I reached the door just as Vincent pulled it open. The cool night air rushed in, but it wasn't the chill that made me stop breathing. It was him. Seo Jae-Min stood in my doorway, looking like a dark, beautiful eclipse. He was too large for the frame, his shoulders blocking out the hallway light, his tailored charcoal suit a stark, violent contrast to the peeling paint of my apartment walls. In his hand, he held a bouquet of sunflowers, not the cheap grocery store kind, but massive, golden blooms that looked like they'd been plucked from a dream. The world didn't just stop, it disintegrated. I saw the shock in his eyes, a raw, naked thing that stripped away the billionaire CEO mask. He looked at me, and for a heartbeat, I saw the boy I'd loved in Chicago, the one who used to read poetry to me while I prepped for my culinary exams. Then, the memory of that video, his mocking laugh, his mother's cold smile, hit me like a physical blow. The grief I'd buried for 6 years roared back to life, turning into a hot, defensive rage. "Mom, look." He came. Vincent beamed, looking between us with a pride that made me want to weep. "I told you he was a good man." "Vincent," I whispered, my voice sounding like it was coming from underwater. "Go to your room. Now." "But Mom, the date." "Vincent." "Room." "Now," I snapped, my eyes never leaving Jaemin's. Vincent's smile faltered, but he sensed the electric tension vibrating between us. He retreated into the shadows of the hallway, leaving me alone with the man who had destroyed my soul. Jae-Min didn't move. He didn't even seem to be breathing. His gaze dropped to the floor, then back to my face, searching every line, every shadow. "Gina," he said. The word was a jagged prayer. He took a step forward, and I instinctively slammed my hand against the door frame to block him. "Don't you dare," I hissed, my voice low and trembling. "Don't you dare say my name like you have the right to breathe it." I had prepared 1,000 things to say. I had rehearsed apologies and demands and questions in the back of the car. But standing here, in the dim light of a hallway that smelled of vanilla and struggle, my mind was a total blank. She was more beautiful than the ghosts in my head. Her hair was pulled back, her face glowing with a fierce, protective light. She looked at me not with love, but with a hatred so pure it made my knees weak. And then there was the boy. Vincent. Up close, the truth was undeniable. He was the piece of me I never knew was missing. Seeing him stand next to her, seeing the life they had built in this tiny, cramped space without me, it felt like 1,000 knives twisting in my gut. "I didn't know," I managed to say, my voice a hollow wreck. "Gina, I swear on my life. I didn't know about him." "You didn't know because you didn't care to look," she spat, her eyes flashing. "You were too busy celebrating your freedom from the worthless distraction." "Isn't that what you called me, Jae-Min? Or was it a temporary hobby?" I flinched. The words felt like acid. "I never said that. I never even thought about it." "Oh, please," she laughed, a harsh, broken sound that hurt more than a scream. "I saw the video. Your mother was very thorough. She wanted to make sure I knew exactly how much I meant to you before she kicked me out of your world. And it worked." I got the message loud and clear. I stepped into the threshold, ignoring her hand on the door. I needed to be closer. I needed to see the truth in her eyes, because nothing she was saying made sense. "What video?" "Gina, my parents told me you took a settlement. They told me you disappeared because you wanted a life I couldn't give you. I've spent 6 years looking for you. I've spent millions." "Keep your millions, Jae-Min," she interrupted, her voice rising. "They don't work here. You think you can just show up with some flowers and a sad story and I'll just, what? Invite you in for cake? Tell you you're a father." The word father hit me with the force of a tidal wave. My eyes burned. I looked past her into the small living room. It was humble, mismatched furniture, a rug that had seen better days, but it was filled with life. There were toys on the floor, drawings on the fridge. It was a home I had been erased from. "He invited me, Gina," I said, trying to steady my breathing. "Vincent." He came to my table. He asked me to be your date because he didn't want you to be alone on your birthday. Her expression softened for a microsecond at the mention of her son, a flicker of maternal pain crossing her face before the mask of stone returned. He's a child, she said. He doesn't know any better. But I do. Then let me stay, I whispered, the billionaire CEO disappearing, replaced by a man begging for a crumb of mercy. Not as your ex. Not as a billionaire. Just as the guest your son invited. Let me sit at your table for 1 hour. If you want me to leave after that, I will walk out that door and I won't come back until you call me. She looked at the sunflowers in my hand, then up at my face. The silence stretched, thick with 6 years of unspoken words and the ghost of a love that refused to die. You have 60 minutes, she said, her voice cold as ice. And if you so much as look at my son the wrong way, I will show you exactly how distracting a black woman from Chicago can be. She stepped back, allowing me to enter. As I crossed the threshold, the air changed. The smell of her, that sweet, earthy scent of cocoa butter and spice, wrapped around me, and for the first time in half a decade, I felt like I could finally take a full breath. But as the door clicked shut behind me, I realized the real battle hadn't even started. I was in her world now, and in this room, my money was worthless and my power was an illusion. I was just a man who had missed 6 years of his son's life, standing in the middle of a birthday he hadn't been invited to by the woman he had never stopped loving. I looked at the small kitchen table, set for 2. Nice shoes, she muttered, glancing at my $1,000 loafers as she walked past me into the kitchen. Try not to scuff the floor. It's the only thing in this house that isn't broken. The sarcasm was a defense, a shield against the tension that was already beginning to simmer between us. I stood there, holding the flowers, feeling like a giant in a dollhouse, watching her move with a grace that made my heart ache. I'm sorry about the floor, I said softly. Don't be sorry about the floor, Jae-Min, she said, turning to face me with a look that could have melted steel. Be sorry about everything else. The apartment was small, but it felt like an ocean. I sat at a table that was clearly a roadside find, sanded down and painted a soft, defiant teal, and felt the sheer weight of my own intrusion. My suit, hand-stitched in Milan, felt like a suit of armor in a room that only required a soul. I watched Gina move. She didn't glide like the socialites in Seoul, she marched. There was a rhythmic, percussive energy to her movements as she pulled a mismatched set of plates from a cupboard that groaned. She didn't look at me. She treated me like a ghost she was forced to haunt. The sunflowers won't fit in a glass, she said, her voice clipped. She grabbed an old, half-chipped ceramic pitcher and shoved the golden blooms into it. They looked wild and out of place against the peeling wallpaper, yet they were the only things in the room that matched the fire in her eyes. I didn't know if you still liked them, I said, my voice sounding too loud in the quiet space. Gina stopped, her back to me. Her shoulders tense, the muscles in her neck corded with a tension that made my own chest ache. I stopped liking a lot of things 6 years ago, Jae-Min. Sunflowers. Rain. Men who make promises they don't intend to keep. She turned around, sliding a plate of steaming oxtail jampong in front of me. The aroma hit me like a physical blow, the exact scent of the Seoul K restaurant, but richer, deeper, infused with the scent of the woman who had created it. Eat, she commanded. Vincent told me you were hungry. Though I'm sure your palate is used to caviar and gold flakes by now. I picked up the heavy, stainless steel chopsticks. I've spent 6 years eating at the finest restaurants in the world, Gina. And not once did I taste anything that made me feel alive. Until I walked into your restaurant. She paused, a plate in her own hand. My restaurant? I'm a cook, Jae-Min. I'm the help. Don't go romanticizing a woman who works 12-hour shifts just to keep the lights on. You're a genius, I said, my gaze locking onto hers. And you're hiding. I'm not hiding, she snapped, sitting down across from me. I'm surviving. There's a difference. But I wouldn't expect a man who flies private to understand the nuances of the ground. I took a bite of the food. It was perfect. It was agonizing. Every swallow felt like a confession. I looked at the chipped plate, then at her. I grew up in a house of marble, Gina. Everything was perfect, and everything was dead. When I met you in that greasy spoon in Chicago, it was the first time I felt like I wasn't a corporate asset. You think I've forgotten that? I think you remembered it just long enough to get bored, she whispered. My heart was doing a frantic tap dance against my ribs. I hated the way he looked in my kitchen. I hated the way his presence seemed to suck all the oxygen out of the room, leaving me lightheaded and desperate. Most of all, I hated that he was actually eating. A man of his status should have turned his nose up at my mismatched chairs. He should have made a comment about the neighborhood. But he sat there, his large frame folded into a chair that looked like it would snap under the weight of his secrets, and he ate my food like it was his last meal. Mom, is he a king? Vincent asked, suddenly appearing from the hallway. He had changed into his favorite pajamas, the ones with the little spaceships, and he was looking at Jae-Min with an expression of pure, unadulterated curiosity. Jae-Min set his chopsticks down, his expression softening in a way that made my breath hitch. Not a king, Vincent. Just a man who runs a very large company. Do you have a fast car? Vincent asked, sliding into the third chair at our tiny table. I have a few, Jae-Min said, the ghost of a smile touching his lips. It was the same smile Vincent gave me when he'd done something clever. The resemblance was so sharp it felt like a serrated blade across my skin. Would you like to see one? Vincent, eat your dinner, I interrupted, my voice sharper than I intended. It's okay, Gina, Jae-Min said softly. He looked at Vincent, his gaze lingering on the boy's brow, his eyes. He was seeing it. The realization was washing over him in slow, tectonic shifts. I could see the moment the math started to add up in his head, the dates, the timing, the face. You have his eyes, Jae-Min whispered, more to himself than to us. I have my mom's nose though, Vincent added proudly, stuffing a piece of oxtail into his mouth. And her brain. She says I'm the smartest boy in California. I don't doubt that for a second, Jae-Min said. He looked at me, and the intensity in his gaze was so heavy I had to look away. There was a hunger there that had nothing to do with food. It was a raw, primal desire to reclaim what he'd lost. We ate in a silence that was thick with the things we couldn't say in front of a 6-year-old. I could feel his eyes on me, on the pulse point of my neck, on my hands as I moved. Every time our eyes met, a spark of electricity jumped between us, a reminder of the fire that used to consume us both. It was a sensual, dangerous tension. It wasn't about touch, it was about the lack of it. The air between us felt like it was vibrating, charged with the memory of his skin against mine, of the way his breath used to catch when I laughed. You're staring, Billionaire, I said, trying to break the spell. Is there something on my face? Just 6 years of life I didn't get to see, he replied, his voice a low, vibrating rumble. Well, look all you want, I said, leaning back and crossing my arms. But don't get comfortable. The clock is ticking. I've never been comfortable a day in my life without you, Gina, he said. I felt a hot flush creep up my neck. Damn it, Jae-Min. He always knew exactly which string to pull to make me unravel. I stood up abruptly, grabbing his empty plate. Vincent, go brush your teeth. It's past your bedtime. But I want to hear about the cars. Vincent protested. Now, Vincent, I said. Vincent sighed, but he knew that tone. He stood up, walked over to Jae-Min, and did something that made my heart stop. He held out his small hand for a fist bump. Jae-Min stared at the small hand for a second, a look of pure, bewildered wonder on his face. Then, with a hand that trembled slightly, he bumped his knuckle against his son's. Good night, Vincent, Jae-Min said, his voice thick with emotion. Good night, Mr. Date, Vincent chirped, disappearing down the hall. As soon as the bathroom door clicked shut, the atmosphere in the kitchen shifted. The family dinner facade evaporated, leaving only the raw, jagged truth. Jae-Min stood up. He was so much taller than I remembered. He stepped around the table, closing the distance between us until I was backed against the kitchen counter, the cool granite pressing into my spine. He didn't touch me. He didn't have to. The heat radiating from his body was enough to make my knees weak. He smelled of rain and expensive tobacco and him. Gina, he whispered, his eyes dropping to my lips. Tell me the truth. Why did you believe that video? Why didn't you come to me? Because you were standing right there on the screen, Jae-Min. I hissed, my eyes stinging with sudden, angry tears. You were laughing. You were with that woman, the one your mother wanted you to marry. You said I was a temporary distraction. You looked so happy, so relieved. I was never happy after you left, he said, his voice a ragged edge. I spent months in a hospital after you disappeared because I couldn't breathe. My mother told me you'd taken $20 million to walk away. She showed me a bank transfer with your signature. I never signed a damn thing. I know that now, he said, taking another half step closer. He was so close I could feel the thud of his heart against my own chest. He raised a hand, his thumb hovering just an inch from my jawline, refusing to bridge the gap. But back then, I was a fool who trusted the wrong people. And you were a woman who didn't trust me enough to ask. I didn't have time to ask, Jae-Min. I had a positive pregnancy test in my pocket and a one-way ticket to a city where I knew nobody. I was protecting my son from a family that thought I was trash. The word son hung in the air like a physical weight. Jae-Min's hand finally moved. He didn't grab me. He just tucked a stray lock of hair behind my ear, his fingers grazing the skin for a microsecond. The contact sent a jolt of pure, unadulterated electricity through my body. He has my face, Jae-Min whispered, his gaze searching for mine. But he has your spirit. He's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. I wanted to push him away. I wanted to melt into him. I was a storm of conflicting desires, caught between the woman who had been betrayed and the woman who still hungered for the man in front of her. He's mine, Jae-Min, I said, my voice shaking. Not yours. You don't get to walk in here and claim him. I'm not trying to claim him, Gina, he said, his voice dropping to a seductive, dangerous silk. I'm trying to claim us. I don't care about the money. I don't care about the empire. I want the girl who taught me how to taste life again. He leaned in, his forehead coming to rest against mine. It wasn't a kiss, but it was more intimate than any physical act. We stayed there, our breaths mingling, the silence of the apartment filled with the ghost of 6 years of longing. Tell me to leave, he whispered against my skin. Tell me you don't feel this, and I'll walk out that door right now. I opened my mouth to say it. I wanted to say it, but the words died in my throat. Just as the tension reached a breaking point, just as I felt my resolve beginning to crumble like dry earth, a loud thud came from the hallway. Mom, I can't find my toothbrush. I jerked away from him, my heart racing. Jae-Min stepped back, his eyes dark with a mixture of frustration and lingering desire. Before we see if Gina finds her strength or falls back into the arms of the man who broke her, make sure to comment, subscribe, and like this video if you think the billionaire deserves a second chance. The kitchen air, once thick with the scent of spices and a heat that wasn't just from the stove, turned brittle. The moment Vincent's door clicked shut, the silence that rushed in wasn't peaceful. It was a vacuum, sucking the oxygen out of the room. I watched Gina. She stood by the sink, her knuckles white as she gripped the edge of the counter. She looked like she was holding onto the earth to keep it from spinning away. I wanted to reach out. I wanted to pull her against me and tell her that the last 6 years had been a fever dream, a glitch in the universe that I was finally here to fix. But the look in her eyes, that jagged, defensive wall of obsidian, told me that if I touched her now, she would shatter, and she'd take me down with her. You want to see it? She whispered, her voice devoid of the fire from before. Now, it was just cold. Analytical. You want to see the man you were when you thought no one was looking? Gina, I told you. Wait. She held up a hand, silencing me. She walked over to a junk drawer near the fridge, the kind of drawer every mother has, filled with rubber bands, old batteries, and broken crayons. She reached into the very back and pulled out a small, lint-covered box. Inside was a phone. It was an old model, the the screen spiderwebbed with cracks, the charging port bent. She plugged it into a fraying cable on the counter. We stood there in the hum of the refrigerator, waiting for the battery to flicker to life. Those few seconds felt like an eternity. I could hear the rain starting to tap against the window pane, a rhythmic, mournful sound that matched the beating of my heart. The screen flickered. A low battery icon appeared, then the home screen, a photo of us. We were in Millennium Park. The bean was reflecting behind us, and she was laughing, her head thrown back, while I looked at her like she was the sun and the stars combined. My throat tightened. I remembered that day. I remembered the way her hair smelled like coconut and how I'd promised myself that morning that I would never let a day go by without seeing that smile. "Here," she said, her voice trembling. She tapped a video file. I leaned in, my breath hitching. The video started. It was grainy, shot from a distance, likely a hidden camera at my family's estate in Seoul. I recognized the garden. I recognized the tuxedo I was wearing for my cousin's engagement gala. In the video, I was standing with Lee Sora, the woman my mother had spent a decade trying to force me to marry. Sora was laughing, her hand on my arm. "She's just a distraction, Sora," the me on the screen said. The voice was mine. The cadence was mine. But the words were poison. A summer hobby in Chicago. My mother is right, she's not built for our world. It was fun while it lasted, but I'm ready for something real now. Someone of my own status. I felt the blood drain from my face. I felt the floor drop out from under my feet. I watched the screen as I clinked glasses with Sora, looking bored and elitist, while my mother walked into the frame and smiled at the camera like a predator who had just finished a meal. "I didn't say that," I whispered, my voice a hollow, terrifying sound. "Gina." I was talking to Sora that night, yes. She was crying because her father was forcing her into an arrangement. I was telling her that my life was finally real because of you. I was telling her that status didn't matter. I said you were the only thing that wasn't a distraction. "The video doesn't lie, Jae-Min," Gina shouted, the tears finally breaking over her lashes. "I watched it 1,000 times. I watched it until I memorized every movement of your mouth. I watched it while I was throwing up in a public bathroom because I was pregnant with a baby whose father thought I was a hobby." "It's a deepfake, Gina," I said, my voice rising with a desperate, frantic energy. "Or it's edited. My family. They own the largest tech conglomerate in East Asia. Do you think they couldn't manipulate a few seconds of audio? They didn't just want you gone. They wanted you to hate me so you would never come back. And they wanted me to think you were a gold digger so I would stop looking." I pulled my own phone from my pocket. My hands were shaking so violently I almost dropped it. I bypassed the biometric locks and opened an encrypted folder, a folder I'd hidden even from my own security team. "Look," I commanded, thrusting the phone toward her. I didn't want to look. I wanted to throw his expensive phone out the window and scream until my lungs gave out. But something in his voice, a raw, guttural desperation, forced my eyes down to the screen. It was an archive. Hundreds, no, thousands of messages. July 12, 2020. "Gina, please. I'm back in Chicago. The apartment is empty. Where are you? I don't care about the money. I don't care about the company. Just tell me you're safe. August 20th, 2020. I saw a girl today who had your walk. I ran 3 blocks before I realized it wasn't you. I think I'm losing my mind. My mother says you took a payout. I don't believe her. I'll never believe her. December 25th, 2020. Merry Christmas, my love. I'm sitting on the floor of our old place. They're evicting the new tenants tomorrow because I bought the building. I'm keeping it empty. Just in case you come home. April 14th, 2022. It's been 2 years. I'm in LA for a meeting. I look for you in every crowd. I hate every woman who isn't you. I'm sorry I couldn't protect you from them." The dates continued. Every week. Every month. For 6 years. The messages weren't the words of a man who had moved on. They were the screams of a man buried alive. I sank into the kitchen chair, the strength leaving my legs. The two realities clashed in my head like tectonic plates. The video. The messages. The lie. The absolute, soul-crushing efficiency of his family's cruelty. They stole 6 years from us, I whispered, the realization hitting me like a physical weight. They let me raise our son in a studio apartment while you were buying buildings just to keep a memory alive. Jae-Min dropped to his knees in front of me. He didn't care about his suit. He didn't care about his dignity. He grabbed my hands, his fingers interlacing with mine, and for the first time, he let the tears fall. I missed his first steps, he choked out, his forehead resting against my knees. I missed his first words. I missed the way he smells when he's sleeping. Gina. I can't get that back. I can't fix what they broke. I looked down at the top of his head, at the dark, silk-soft hair I used to run my fingers through. The anger was still there, a dull ache in the background, but the grief was larger. We were two victims of a war we didn't even know we were fighting. He's a good boy, Jae-Min, I said softly, my hand trembling as I finally, tentatively, touched his hair. He's smart. He's kind. He has your stubbornness and my temper. Jae-Min looked up, his eyes bloodshot and filled with a terrifying resolve. I'm going to give him the world, Gina. I'm going to give you everything. We're leaving tonight. I have a house in the hills, security, doctors. I pulled my hands back, the wall slamming back into place. No. Jae-Min blinked, confused. What do you mean no? You can't stay here. My family, if they found out I was here, if they knew about Vincent. That's exactly why I'm staying, I said, standing up. I felt a cold, sharp power rising in me. I wasn't the scared girl who ran away 6 years ago. I was a mother. I was a survivor. You think you can just buy us a new life and the problem goes away? Your mother is still the woman who made that video. Your father is still the man who tried to erase my existence. If we go with you now, we're just moving from one cage to a more expensive one. I'll protect you, he insisted, standing up, his height once again filling the room. You couldn't protect me then, Jae-Min. Why should I trust you now? I stepped closer, poking a finger into his broad chest. You want to be in his life? You want to be in mine? Then you don't save us. You don't hide us away in some mansion while you go off to play CEO. You deal with them. You tear down the empire they used to hurt us. You make it so they can never touch us again. Until then, you're just a guest at my table. Jae-Min stared at me, shock turning into a slow, burning admiration. He'd spent his life surrounded by people who bowed to his wealth. He'd never met anyone who looked at his billions and saw a burden. You've changed, he whispered, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. I had to, I said. The girl you love died in a bus station in Chicago. The woman standing here, she doesn't need your money. She needs your spine. The sharp, sudden trill of a ringtone broke the moment. Jae-Min pulled his phone out. His face went stone cold. The Ice King was back, his jaw setting into a line of pure iron. It's her, he said, showing me the screen. Mother. Don't answer it, I said, my heart starting to race. I have to, he replied, his gaze locking onto mine. Because she's not calling to check on me. My security team reports to her first. She knows I'm in the zip code. She knows I've been here for 2 hours. He swiped the screen and put it on the speaker. Jae-Min, a woman's voice came through, elegant, cold, and sounding like a razor blade wrapped in silk. I hope the nostalgia was worth the trip. But playtime is over. There is a car waiting at the end of the block to take you to the airport. Don't make me do something we'll both regret regarding the girl and her little secret. My breath hitched. She knew. She'd known about Vincent the whole time. Jae-Min's grip on the phone was so tight I thought it would crack. He looked at me, and I saw the ruthless CEO shift into something much more dangerous, a father. Mother, Jae-Min said, his voice a low, vibrating growl that made the hair on my arms stand up. If you even breathe in the direction of this apartment, I will burn every building with the CEO name on it to the ground. I'm not coming to the airport. I'm staying for cake. He hung up and tossed the phone onto the teal table. Well, I said, my voice shaking despite my best efforts to stay strong. I hope you're hungry. Because if she's coming, we're going to need all the energy we can get. The silence that followed the click of the hang-up was heavier than any boardroom standoff I'd ever navigated. My mother didn't make idle threats. She didn't hope for things, she engineered them. If she said a car was at the end of the block, it meant my movements had been tracked from the moment I touched down at LAX. Every Tuesday I had spent at Seoul K, every tip I'd left, every longing look I'd cast toward that kitchen door, she had watched it all through a digital lens, waiting for me to lead her straight to the woman she thought she'd erased. I looked at Gina. Her face was pale, but her jaw was set in that terrifying, beautiful line of defiance. She wasn't a victim. She was a soldier who had been fighting a solo war for 6 years, and I had just brought the enemy to her doorstep. The windows, I said, my voice dropping into the low, clipped tone of a man back in the barracks. I didn't wait for her permission. I moved across the small living room, flicking the lock on the balcony door and pulling the thin, floral curtains shut. Stay away from the glass, Gina. If they're here, they have eyes on the perimeter. Jae-Min, you're scaring me, she whispered, though she didn't move. She stood her ground in the center of the room, her hands tucked into the pockets of her apron. This is America. This is my home. They can't just take you. They don't take people, Gina. They retrieve assets, I said, turning to face her. I stepped into her space, my hands hovering near her shoulders before I finally let them land. I needed to ground her. I needed to feel that she was real, that she was here, before the world tried to tear us apart again. To my mother, I am an asset. To my father, I am the legacy. And now that they know about Vincent, he is the most valuable piece on the board. I felt her shudder under my touch. The mention of our son's name acted like a lightning strike. They won't touch him, she hissed, her voice vibrating with a primal, maternal fury. I will burn this entire city down before I let those people near my son. I looked into her eyes, deep, dark pools of fire, and felt a surge of pride so sharp it hurt. They won't have to. Because I am the one standing between you and them. I am the shield now, Gina. I let them win 6 years ago because I didn't know I was in a fight. I thought I was just a man in love. Now I'm a father who has been robbed of his life. There is no version of this story where they win. I leaned down, pressing my forehead against hers. It was a desperate, silent oath. I could smell the faint scent of flour and birthday cake on her, and, for a second, the danger outside felt like a distant hum. I have enough evidence to tank the Seo Group's stock by 40% by morning, I whispered against her skin. I've been building a digital kill switch for years, just in case they ever tried to force me into that marriage with Sora. I'll use it. I'll turn the empire to ash before I let them use their money to hurt you again. His forehead was cool against mine, but his skin felt like it was humming with a terrifying energy. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to sink into the expensive scent of his cologne and let him take the weight of the world off my shoulders. But the girl who got on that bus in Chicago knew better. You're talking about war, Jae-Min, I said, my breath hitching as I pulled back just an inch. I don't want a war. I want my son to grow up without looking over his shoulder. I want to be able to cook a meal without wondering if the man eating it is a spy. Then let me handle it, he said, his gaze intense. How? I challenged, stepping out of his hold. By standing at my door like a bodyguard? You're a billionaire in a $1,000 suit in a neighborhood where people get evicted for being 10 minutes late on rent. You stick out like a sore thumb. I walked into the kitchen, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I needed to move. I needed to do something normal. I grabbed the coffee tin and started measuring out scoops with trembling hands. What are you doing? Jae-Min asked, following me, his large frame making the kitchen feel like a closet. Making coffee, I said, my voice cracking. If I'm going to be under siege by the Korean version of the Borg, I'm going to be caffeinated for it. You want some? Or is powdered milk below your pay grade? Jae-Min stared at me for a beat, a look of pure, bewildered admiration crossing his face. The Ice King mask slipped for a second, and he let out a short, jagged breath that might have been a laugh if he weren't so terrified for us. "Black is fine, Gina," he said softly. Just as the water began to hiss in the pot, a heavy, rhythmic thud echoed through the apartment. It wasn't a knock. It was the sound of authority. Thud. 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 "Director Seo, we know you're inside." The voice was masculine, speaking in perfect, unaccented Korean. I didn't need a translator to know what it meant. My skin went cold. Jaemin's entire demeanor shifted. He went from a man begging for a second chance to a king defending his throne. He motioned for me to stay in the kitchen. He didn't ask, he commanded with a single, sharp look. He walked to the door, his hand resting on the deadbolt but not turning it. "You are on private property," Jae-Min said, his voice a low, vibrating growl that I'd never heard from him before. It wasn't the voice of the boy I loved, it was the voice of a man who had killed his own mercy to survive. "If you step over this threshold without a warrant, I will consider it a kidnapping attempt. My personal security is 3 minutes away. Leave. Now." "We are not here for you, Director," the voice came back, cold and hollow. "We are here to deliver a formal notice from the chairman's legal counsel." Jae-Min paused. I saw his shoulders tense. He slowly turned the lock and opened the door just a crack, keeping his body positioned as a solid wall of meat and bone between the hall and my living room. A hand reached through, clad in a white glove, and handed over a thick, cream-colored envelope. "The chairman suggests you read the 3rd page carefully, Director. The flight to Seoul departs in 4 hours. It would be a shame if the local authorities had to be involved in a welfare check on an undocumented income household." Jae-Min snatched the envelope and slammed the door, locking every bolt with a violent finality. I walked into the living room, the coffee forgotten. "What is it? What did she do?" Jae-Min ripped the envelope open, his eyes scanning the pages with lightning speed. As he reached the 3rd page, I watched his face go from iron cold to a ghostly, translucent white. He looked like he'd been disemboweled. "Jae-Min? Talk to me," I shouted, grabbing his arm. He looked at me, and for the first time since he walked into my apartment, I saw true, unadulterated fear in his eyes. "It's not a retrieval order," he whispered, his voice shaking. "It's a petition for emergency custody. My mother. She's filed a claim with the state of California. She's claiming that because you work under the table, because you have no legal paper trail of income for the last 3 years, and because you've hidden a Seo heir from his biological family, you are an unfit parent." I felt the air leave my lungs. The room began to tilt. She wants to take Vincent? "She already has a judge on standby," Jae-Min said, his grip on the papers so tight the heavy cardstock began to tear. "She's using my own name against you, Gina. She's claiming I am the one seeking custody because I've discovered my son living in substandard conditions. But you're right here." I screamed, the panic finally breaking through. Tell them it's a lie." "I will," he said, pulling me into his arms, his grip almost bruisingly tight. "I will tell them everything. But Gina, if we stay here, if we let them bring the police to this door for a welfare check, they will take him while the courts sort it out. And sorting it out for a family like mine takes years. Years we don't have." "Mom? Why is everyone shouting?" We both froze. Vincent stood in the hallway, rubbing his eyes, his little spaceship pajamas glowing in the dim light. He looked at us, at his mother crying and the stranger holding her, and I saw the first flicker of real fear in my brave little boy's eyes. The walls of the apartment, once a sanctuary for Gina and my son, now felt like a glass cage. I could practically hear the ticking of my mother's watch from 3,000 miles away. She wasn't just coming for me, she was coming for the legacy. In her eyes, Vincent wasn't a child, he was a corporate asset that had been misplaced in a zip code that didn't appear on her map of the world. "We have to move," I said, my voice low, vibrating with a cold, focused adrenaline. I grabbed the heavy cream envelope and shoved it into the pocket of my blazer. Gina, get his things. Only what he needs. No toys, no heavy bags. We're leaving through the back. The back? Gina looked at me, her eyes wide, but her hands already moving to grab a small backpack from the hook by the door. Jae-Min, there are 4 black sedans out there. They've got the front and the alley covered. You think they haven't mapped the fire escape? They've mapped the fire escape for a billionaire, I said, stepping toward her, my hands grounding her shoulders for a split second. They're waiting for me to call my security detail. They're waiting for a helicopter or a high-speed pursuit. They aren't expecting us to walk out of here like we belong to the pavement. You don't belong to the pavement, Gucci, she muttered, though there was a flicker of a smile, a sharp, dangerous thing on her lips. But I do. Vincent, get your shoes on. The quiet ones. We're going on an adventure. Vincent appeared at the bedroom door, his small face pale, but his eyes bright with that eerie, observant intelligence. He didn't cry. He didn't ask 1,000 questions. He just looked at me, then at his mother, and nodded once. The boy was a soldier. My heart ached with a mixture of pride and a devastating guilt that he had to be one at 6 years old. Ready, Mom, he whispered. I watched Jae-Min try to look inconspicuous. It was like watching a panther try to pretend he was a house cat. He took off his blazer, leaving him in a white button-down that stretched across his shoulders, the sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms that looked like they were carved from granite. He looked raw. He looked like the man I'd fallen in love with before the world told him he had to be a king. Follow me, I whispered. We didn't take the elevator. We took the service stairs, the air thick with the smell of old grease and cleaning fluid. Jae-Min's expensive shoes clicked against the concrete, a sound that felt like a gunshot in the silence. I grabbed his hand, my fingers interlacing with his, pulling him faster. Through the basement, I directed. The laundry room has a delivery hatch that opens into the neighbor's yard. The sedans are watching the street lights, not the shadows behind the hibiscus bushes. We scrambled through the hatch, Jae-Min hoisting Vincent over the ledge with a grace that spoke of his mandatory military service. As he climbed through himself, his custom-tailored trousers snagged on a rusted bolt. I heard the distinct rip of expensive wool. Watch the suit, billionaire, I teased, my voice a jagged wire of nerves. Try not to sneeze. The dust in this crawl space is older than your family's tax haven. I don't care about the suit, Gina, he hissed, his breath hot against my ear as we crouched in the tall, unkempt grass of the neighbor's yard. I care about the 60 seconds it's going to take for them to realize that apartment 4B is empty. We didn't go for a limo. We went for my neighbor's beat-up, 2012 silver hatchback. I had the spare key because I watched her cat when she went to Vegas. It smelled like stale fries and cheap air freshener, a far cry from the heated leather seats Jae-Min was used to. Get in, I commanded. And stay low. I folded my frame into the cramped back seat, pulling Vincent into my lap. The boy leaned his head against my chest, his small heart beating a frantic rhythm against mine. It was the first time I'd held him like this, as a father, as a protector. The scent of him, soap, and a hint of the chocolate cake from earlier filled my senses, sharpening my resolve into a blade. Where are we going? I asked as Gina pulled the car away from the curb, driving with a casual, agonizing slowness that made my skin crawl. A place where the chairman wouldn't look, Gina said, her eyes fixed on the rearview mirror. The back of the restaurant. Bill has a small office above the kitchen. It's unlisted, no Wi-Fi, and the only way in is through the walk-in freezer's secondary latch. The restaurant, I repeated. The irony wasn't lost on me. I had spent 6 years trying to get into that kitchen, and now I was using it as a bunker. As we drove through the neon-blurred streets of LA, the silence in the car was heavy with the weight of the financial nuclear option I was currently preparing on my phone. I was deleting my own biometric access to the Seo Group's offshore accounts, triggering a security lockout that would freeze billions in liquidity. It was a suicide mission for my career, but a life raft for my family. Gina, I said softly, watching the way her hands gripped the steering wheel. If I do this, if I burn the bridges, there is no going back to the way things were. I won't be the director anymore. I'll just be a man. A man with a lot of enemies and a very angry mother. Good, she said, her voice steady. I never liked the director anyway. He was too stiff. We reached the restaurant. The Seoul K sign was flickering, the S hanging by a wire. We slipped through the back, the cold air of the industrial kitchen hitting us like a wall. The smell of garlic and old steam was a comfort now. We climbed the narrow, wooden stairs to the loft office. It was cramped, filled with crates of soy sauce and old ledgers. I sat on a crate, pulling my phone out to record the final piece of the puzzle, the video confession that would expose my mother's deepfake and her attempt to weaponize the custody laws. Once I hit post, the stock will drop. She'll be too busy answering to the board of directors to worry about a welfare check, I said, my thumb hovering over the screen. Wait, Gina whispered, her hand flying to her mouth. I looked up. In the corner of the dark office, a shadow moved. A woman stepped out from behind a stack of flour bags. She was dressed in a sleek, black trench coat, her face pale under the flickering fluorescent light. It wasn't my mother's security. It was Lee Sora, the woman from the video. The woman my family had tried to force me to marry. She looked at me, then at Gina, her eyes filled with a mixture of exhaustion and a strange, sharp pity. In her hand, she held a small, silver flash drive. You're late, Jae-Min, Sora said, her voice a hollow whisper. Your mother isn't just filing for custody. She's already contacted the embassy. She's claiming Vincent was kidnapped from Seoul 6 years ago. She has the birth records to prove it. Faked, of course, but enough to get the boy on a private plane before sunrise. I stood up, my pulse roaring in my ears. The room felt like it was spinning. Why are you here, Sora? I growled, stepping in front of Gina and Vincent. To finish the job? Sora looked at the flash drive, then at Gina. I'm here because I'm tired of being a puppet. This drive has the original, unedited audio from that night in the garden. It has the metadata showing the deepfake was created in the Seo group's internal labs. She stepped closer, the light catching the tears in her eyes. She ruined my life too, Jae-Min. Don't let her do it to him. The small office above the kitchen felt like the interior of a confession booth. The air was thick with the scent of old cardboard, floor wax, and the sharp, ozone tang of the laptop Sora had produced from her coat. I stared at the silver flash drive in my hand. It was a small, cold piece of metal, but it held the weight of 6 lost years. If this is a trap, Sora, I said, my voice barely a whisper, I will not survive it. And neither will they. Sora looked at Gina, then at Vincent, who was curled up on a stack of flour bags, his eyes heavy with the sleep he was fighting with every ounce of his Seo blood. I'm not doing this for you, Jae-Min, she said, her voice brittle. I'm doing it for the girl I used to be. The one who didn't have Gina to fight for her. I plugged the drive in. The file popped up, an unedited audio stream from the night of the gala. She's just a distraction, Sora. The fake voice from Gina's phone echoed in my head, but then the real audio began to play. She's the only thing that's real, Sora, my true voice rumbled through the laptop's tinny speakers. If my mother thinks she can buy Gina off, she doesn't know the woman I love. I'd rather be a cook's husband in a basement in Chicago than sit on a throne built out of your father's misery. Take the inheritance. Give it to the board. I'm done. The silence that followed was absolute. I didn't look at the screen. I looked at Gina. She was trembling. Not with fear, but with the sudden, violent collapse of a wall she had spent 2,000 days building. Her hand was pressed against her mouth, her eyes wide and swimming with a grief that was finally being replaced by the truth. She looked at me, and for the first time in 6 years, the ghost chef was gone. The woman who loved me was back. You said that, she choked out. You told them you'd give it all up? I did give it all up, Gina, I said, stepping toward her, ignoring the laptop, ignoring Sora, ignoring the world. I just didn't know they'd stolen the prize I was fighting for. I reached out, and this time, she didn't flinch. She fell into me. Her forehead hit my chest, and she let out a sob that felt like it was tearing her soul open. I wrapped my arms around her, my chin resting on the top of her head, my eyes closing as I finally held the only empire I ever wanted. The world was spinning, but for the first time, I wasn't trying to stop it. The audio kept playing in a loop in my brain. I'd rather be a cook's husband. He hadn't abandoned me. He hadn't mocked me. He had been a prisoner in a golden cage while I was a prisoner in a gray one. All those years I'd spent hating him, using that hate as fuel to get through the double shifts and the lonely nights. It had all been a lie fed to me by a woman who saw people as chess pieces. I'm sorry, I sobbed into a shirt. Jae-Min, I'm so sorry I didn't believe in us. Don't be, he whispered, his hands stroking my hair with a reverence that made my heart ache. We were kids fighting gods, Gina. But we aren't kids anymore. The heavy, metallic clack of the walk-in freezer door downstairs echoed through the floorboards. We both froze. The romantic haze evaporated, replaced by a cold, sharp dread. The sound of heels followed. Click, click, click. Slow, rhythmic, merciless. She's here, Sora whispered, her face going translucent. She retreated into the shadows of the loft. I wiped my face, my eyes catching Vincent's. He was awake now, sitting up, his small face set in a mask of terrifying calm. I walked over to him, taking his hand. Stay behind me, baby. No matter what. The door to the loft office pushed open. Chairman Seo stepped in. She looked exactly like she did in the tabloids, perfectly coiffed hair, a suit that cost more than my apartment building, and eyes that were as cold and empty as the deep sea. She didn't look at the flour bags or the dusty ledgers. She looked at Jae-Min. Enough of this melodrama, Jae-Min, she said, her voice a silk ribbon around her throat. The car is waiting. The custody papers are served. You can come home with your dignity, or you can watch the LAPD carry that boy out of here in front of a dozen news cameras. I've already leaked the unfit environment story to the local affiliates. Choose. Jae-Min stepped forward, but I moved faster. I stepped in front of him, my hand still gripping Vincent's. I felt a power rising in me that didn't come from money or status. It came from the kitchen. It came from the years of burning my hands and sharpening my knives. You're in my kitchen now, Chairman, I said, my voice steady, low, and dangerous. The chairman finally looked at me, her lip curling in a faint, elegant sneer. The cook speaks. How quaint. The cook has a live stream running, I said, pointing to the laptop on the desk. And Lee Sora just handed us the original audio from the gala. Every major news outlet in Seoul and New York just got a notification. If you move 1 inch toward my son, I hit public. Your perfect family legacy won't just be tarnished. It will be a crime scene. The chairman's eyes flickered to the laptop, then to Sora in the shadows. For the first time, a hairline fracture appeared in her porcelain mask. You think a scandal can stop me? She hissed. I think a 40% drop in your stock price can, Jae-Min said, stepping up beside me. He didn't look at his mother with hatred. He looked at her with pity. He pulled his CEO ID badge from his pocket and dropped it onto the dusty floor. I'm done, Mother. I'm not the director. I'm not your heir. I'm Gina's husband and Vincent's father. If you want the company, take it. But if you touch them, I will spend every cent I have left to ensure you spend the rest of your life in a courtroom. The chairman looked at the badge on the floor. She looked at the laptop. She was a woman of logic, and the logic was clear. She had lost. She couldn't take the boy without destroying the thing she loved most, her power. You will regret this, Jae-Min, she whispered. You are choosing a life of nothing. I'm choosing a life of everything, he replied. I reached onto a nearby crate and grabbed a small, half-eaten birthday cupcake I'd packed in Vincent's bag. I stepped forward and pressed it into the chairman's gloved hand. Wait, I said, a sassy, sharp smile touching my lips. You forgot your distraction. It's sweet. You should try it. It might help with that bitter personality of yours. Now get out of my restaurant before I call the health inspector on your soul. The chairman stared at the cupcake as if it were a ticking bomb. She turned, her heels clicking a frantic, defeated retreat down the stairs. The silence that followed was the most beautiful thing I'd ever heard. Jae-Min slumped against the desk, the adrenaline leaving him in a rush. I walked over to him, pulling his head back to mine. We stayed there, forehead to forehead, our breaths finally evening out. So, he whispered, his eyes searching for mine. I'm unemployed. I have no car, no house in the hills, and my mother wants to kill me. Does this mean the date was a success? I laughed, the sound bubbling up from a place of pure, unadulterated relief. It was the best birthday present I've ever had, Jae-Min. Before we see the final, heart-melting moment between a father and the son he finally gets to keep, make sure to comment, subscribe, and like for more Afro-Korean romance stories that prove love is the only empire worth building. Vincent walked over, looking at the two of us with a small, knowing smirk. Does this mean you're going to teach me how to drive the fast cars now? Jae-Min reached down, scooping Vincent up into his arms and holding him tight. I'll teach you everything, Vincent. But first, I think we need to finish that birthday cake. We stood in the dim light of the loft, a billionaire with nothing, a cook with everything, and a boy who had brought them both home. The war was over. The kitchen was quiet. And for the first time in 6 years, the soup didn't taste like a ghost. It tasted like a beginning. The end.